Insanity. These darn people, they don't let me out the office. But she said yes without hesitation, didn't even ask me where. She just said, what date? And so when I told her that I wanted her to talk about exercise as a right and not a privilege, it was coming from a place of feeling like Pilates, when particularly the studio that I go to, are mostly older white women. And I very rarely see another brown face of any kind, whether it's Latino, whether it is another Black woman or whoever. It's just me. And I thought, this can't be life, but it's the only life I've ever seen in Pilates, except for on the internet. And so I wanted her to talk about just her work and how we approach our own physical care, and to be able to ask any questions we want. So Sonja, thank you so much for giving up your time. We'd love to know your background and how you came to your work. And I know you have a whole thing planned, so I just wanted to turn it over to you. But thank you, and welcome to the Rooted Collaborative.
Oh, I realized I had to unmute myself. I was like, why can't I talk? Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me to this today. I'm very excited about talking to you guys, and I am one of those lovely Sagittarius folks who don't always plan what they have to say, because I like going off the top of my head. Sometimes my plans typically are in here, versus written, unless I have to write. But just to give a little history about who I am. Again, as you know, my name is Sonja Herbert. One of these days I'll get rid of that Herbert last name, because that's my ex's last name, and I want to get my shit back. Sorry.
Hey, reclaim your name.
I want to get my name back one of these days. But right now I have so many articles and podcasts with this name. It's just like, whatever. But yeah, so I'm a former social worker. I was a social worker for about a decade and a half, did some really wonderful work with some great clients, and eventually transitioned over to teaching Pilates. And I was introduced to Pilates by a Black woman, which is pretty unusual, I think, based upon what my conversations with the women that are a part of my group. Yes, girl, I sure am going to get my name back. Okay. So, yes. So in probably like 2006, my oldest, my daughter, who's 26 now, she used to dance for Harlem School of the Arts, or that's where she took her classes. And one of her teachers, whose name was Cynthia Shipley, who is also in my Facebook support group, she was teaching this thing called Pilates. And a friend of mine, who was a modern dance teacher there, said, hey, why don't you come take this class? It's Pilates. And I was like, I never heard of that. What the hell? And so I've always been in fitness in some type of way, keeping myself fit. So I was really big into weightlifting and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't need that. I'm good, So I say, well, okay, I'll go to the class. Went to the class, could barely do anything. And so I'm very competitive after hanging around two boys all my life. So extremely competitive. So I'm like, I'm going to learn how to do this. So I went twice a week, felt it start to change my body. Had always wanted to do something that was in fitness, but just wasn't sure what it was, and found out that that was it. So then I got certified in 2007, and, make a long story short, the rest is history. So after that, I had originally tried to start this platform not too long after I had been certified. And I had actually a couple of women who were in my group who are much older than I am in age and also in teaching years. They were going to be the ones that started. We tried to put that together, and because a lot of them are dancers and choreographers, some of them are still choreographing to this day. Most of them are retired dancers. I am not a dancer. I'm more of a singer, musical theater. But so it didn't happen. And, we tried, and, schedules just didn't come together. So we axed it for a moment. And then one day in 2017, May 2017, this was literally after a breakup. Isn't it amazing what women will do after a breakup? But God was good. And I was at a very low point in my life.
I can't believe you said that, because when we were talking on Happy Hour on Sunday, we were talking about the fact that the only time I ever really started working out was when I was upset. Yeah. And angry, like, you know what the hell with you? I'm gonna go get my body back, you know? So I just love that you just brought that home for us real quick. I'm sorry, go ahead. So
no, that's okay. So, you know, at the time I was teaching, and I had always kind of like, you know, where are all the other Black women? Because I know I started with a Black woman, but you know, who are all, you know, where are the rest of them? You know, because I'm not seeing them. I wasn't teaching with them. And, you know, so I was just still wondering about that. And so I was also just reevaluating my life at that point, you know, trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do? What is my purpose? I know I'm teaching Pilates. I know I really enjoy it. You know, I know I've done social work. I love that. I know I used to sing and act, you know, but what am I supposed to be doing? And I can't even tell you exactly what happened. All I know is that all of a sudden I reached out to a friend of mine who's also in my group, who has a humongous following. And I said, hey, do you know any other Black women who teach Pilates? Just, yeah. So I said, well, I think I want to start this Facebook support group, and, you know, like a feature page. It wasn't going to be anything. I was just like, you know, just to kind of solve a problem that I thought needed to be fixed. And so, you know, I started, you know, reaching out to these Black women, and another woman who used to be in my group, she gave me some names. Before I knew it, I had like, you know, 80 people. And then things started to grow from there. And before I knew it, you know, I had like 100, and by August, I had like 180 women. This is all over the world in the group. And the thing that really just kind of put us over the fence, with, you know, like people like wondering who is this group and who started it and things like that. I had written an article in 2017. This was maybe like my second published article ever. And I wrote an article about the lack of Black female representation in fitness for Girls Gone Strong. They put that article out literally the weekend after Ferguson happened, and they did it on purpose. And after then, like, things just blew up for me. All of a sudden, everybody's like, who is this group? Who, you know, and all this kind of stuff like that. So ever since then, you know, several articles later and several podcasts later and several everything else later, now I have a wonderful group of women who are on my Facebook support group, and there's about 390 of them all over the world, which is a lot compared to, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot. And this is like worldwide, internationally. And we now have a group for men. Well, there's not a support group, but there's an Instagram page called Melanin Brothers of Pilates, and I co-founded that with 7 other guys who I actually tell what to do. So
I love that.
Yeah. With my little 5'3" self and 51. So I tell them what to do. And they do it. They're good. They're great guys. So yeah, so that's just a little bit of history. It's a very short history, but if you look up Black Girl Pilates, then you'll be able to see like all the articles. If you look up my name, you'll probably be able to see all the articles I've written. Some of them were not necessarily about Pilates, but most of the things, everything that I write about is always going to have a Black perspective. And that's one of the things that I've told the platforms that I do write for, that if I write anything, it's always going to be from a Black perspective, because nobody wants to know our perspective. And so I'm going to tell you what our perspective is. So, but anyway, I know that the topic was about exercise being a right and not a privilege. And I was thinking about how, you know, I was thinking about the definitions of rights, right, and privilege. And when I think about like, what do I have? I have a right to live freely, right? I have a right to have a home. I have a right to medical care. I have a right to love who I want to love. I have a right to wear my hair however I'd like to. Nowadays, people, you know, I mean, my pronouns are she and her, but people have a right to be who they would like to be, whether it's their pronouns are they and them, or, you know, or he and she, or whatever. You know, those are our rights as human beings to actually live our lives, right? So everybody has those rights. And then there's folks who have, then there's privilege. Like we all have a specific privilege that affords us to be able to do things, and not everybody has a privilege, right? And well, we do have privilege, but there's varying degrees of it. So if we're talking about Black privilege versus like white privilege, it's two totally different things. So if you talk about someone who is an A-list person like Beyonce, she has a privilege that you and I and the rest of this women in this group do not have, right? So she could pay me, you know, a whole damn salary for the month to come and teach her Pilates at her, you know, at her home. You know, not a lot of Black people can do that. But someone like myself or like you, we can't do that. You know, I mean, I can barely afford myself. So, I mean, so that's an example of privilege, you know, but and when you're talking about like Black people and things like that. Now, the difference between her and someone else, like, you know, a Warren Buffett, is that even though she has that privilege and she can pay for those type of things, you know, Warren Buffett is also, he's white and he's also a man. So that affords him even more privilege than someone like her, because she's a black person and she's a woman. So that puts her lower on the totem pole. So he could get so much more than she can. And so when we're talking about exercise and the right to exercise, I look at it from our perspective, that just like we should be afforded the right to vote and to assemble as Black people without the white gaze. We have the right to exercise, and it's not necessarily a privilege. And I think that white supremacy has caused us to think that it's a privilege to exercise. And the reason why it's a privilege to exercise is because it's kind of a white thing. Just like you said earlier, that Pilates, when you've gone to your Pilates studio, that is just you know, that there's no one there who looks like you know? And that's their privilege, you know? Now, Pilates was started by a German white man. If you guys hear music, sorry, it's New York City. Good Lord. But, you know, it was started by a white man, yes, who brought it from Germany to here and started working with, you know, various types of people and stuff like that. Now, a lot of us did not know within the Pilates community, and I'm talking Black women, did not know that one of the women who worked with Joseph Pilates was a Black woman. And so there is our history in regards to the connection to this Pilates method. And we have this group of people that we call Pilates elders, because they work specifically with him and by his side. And she was one of those people. Yeah. So I didn't know that. And here's where you kind of see, like, you talk a little bit about colorism, right? So she was a very, very fair skinned woman, but you know, you could tell she wasn't one who could necessarily pass, so to speak, but she was very fair skinned. And so a white person would look at her and be like, oh, well, she's powerful, you know, like me, like, oh, you know, you're not like those other Black people. So, you know, so I can talk to you. You're not dark skinned or whatever. Right. And she's very well known within the Pilates industry, although she's since died several years ago. And a lot of people use her techniques and things like that. But amongst the elders, she was not the most popular. The most popular elder was a white woman who was from Russia, who is basically like the guru of Pilates. But that's a whole other podcast, to be honest. But going back to, you know, to privilege, as Pilates started to get more popular, right? I think it started to really like blow up in the 90s and things like that. And then you start seeing these studios pop up with all this equipment. You started seeing classes and gyms and things like that. And so the folks who were able to experience Pilates, it wasn't us. It was mostly white people, you know, because at that point, the only people who were teaching it were mostly white people, you know. And if there were any Black people who had an experience or got to experience Pilates in its beginning stages, right, when it was starting to blow up, it was because they were a dancer. And Kathy Grant, who is the elder that I'm talking about, she did a lot of rehabilitation with dancers. They came to her classes on a regular basis. She actually had a studio in Bendales, which is obviously, as we know, very, very white. So it was her and then two other women who were in my group who are Black. They were there training these rich white people, you know? So that's their privilege to be able to do that, you know, to be able to pay for those sessions. And even though those sessions, I think at that time were probably not as expensive compared to today. And so today you look at session prices, not even just for Pilates, but even for something like, you know, yoga or a personal trainer or whatever. Some of the prices are way, yes, it's very expensive. It's way out of our, I won't even say that we can't afford it. What I will say is that we have a different priority. The first thing that we're going to do is, I need to pay my rent. I need to buy food. I need to pay for my medication. I have kids who need clothing and shoes. And so it's not that we don't want to, it's because that's not on our priority. It's not on our list of priorities of things to pay for. Or and here's my thing too. I did a podcast maybe not too long ago with a friend of mine, Kristen Iris, who has melanated uprising. And I told her that this is just my theory of what I think happened. So when we talk about exercise, we talk about it as like working out, right? And so if we go back in history and during slavery times or enslaved times, we were constantly in the fields or whatever we were doing is constantly doing like hard labor, hard work, you know, things like that. And my thought is that anything to us that sort of triggers something that seems like work and really, really hard work that causes us to, you know, feel some sort of pain, not in a bad way, but, you know, soreness, you know, to me, that almost triggers like back in the day, you know, what our ancestors felt like when they were in the fields and picking cotton and things like that. And although, you know, they tried to make it, you know, a great time of their life when they could, you know, because this is, you know, this was just life. I feel like that almost translates to us in the present form, because we see it as like, you know, we see it as like, oh, that just sounds like hard work. Yeah. Yeah. And this is just my thoughts on it. Because I was thinking, you know, what is it about exercise that we're just like, you know, I don't know, that just seems like it's for white people or whatever. And so if you compare our work, either in the fields or, you know, in their house or taking care of their kids or whatever, to the things, you know, to the exercise that we see white people do, which we basically said that when we saw exercise done, we only saw white people doing it. And we're like, I don't want to do that. You know, it doesn't look fun or whatever. Why would I need to do that? And I also feel like that previously to that, to us coming to the United States, and again, these are just my theories, that we had a very healthy outlook on our own bodies. I mean, if you look at, you know, a lot of the African tribes and stuff like that, the type of body type that I have would be too small for them. they were like, oh, you're too little, you know. They like larger women, you know. And then those of them who live in a that's more of a tribal life, you know, where they kind of live off the land or whatever, you know, their exercise is going out and taking care of their children, and you know, going out and finding things to cook or whatever, you know. And some of them, you know, are, you know, out in, you know, the workforce, and they're doing work and things like that. And so they don't really see exercise to them is, I'm not going to say it's not important, but maybe it kind of isn't, you know. So I feel like, you know, now that we have, and I wouldn't say that we have been introduced to exercise, but we realized the need for it. And we started to see people who look like us who are doing it, which is also key. Because if you don't see someone who looks like you doing it, then you think, well, automatically, oh, you know, well, that's not for me, you know, so why do I want to do it? And I think that's what we saw for years, was that, you know, we see this Jack LaLanne and who are these other people, all these other white people doing things. That's all I used to see on ESPN when I was younger, you know. So I was just like, I just saw white people, and I might see like a random black person, you know, who's in the background, but I never really saw anyone who looked like me. And so it's kind of like, you know, well, why do I want to do this? You know, nobody, we're not doing it, so obviously it's not important. So I figure if black folks are not doing it, it's not important. And the only time that I thought that exercise might have been important would be like, you know, someone who's like a track star, or, you know, someone who plays basketball, some sport or something like that. Then you exercise, you know, otherwise, like, for what, you know?
But
But
even that is like associated with achievement. Like I'm
yes.
still sitting stewing, and I think Michaela made a comment. She said, this reminds me of why many Black women are adverse to breastfeeding. We were forced to be wet nurses for so long. Like, you're talking about the genetic memory. That's like that deep, like subconscious stuff. I'm like, deep. This is very deep. But yeah, but the ones that we associate with are actually associated with achievement, and with show, and
Yes.
with prize.
Yes.
So if I follow your train of thought going into that, like, it just opens up a whole other world. So just doing it just to do it without that, without the physical, without the visible praise and the price tag that gets attached to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem as important or worth it when there are other things that you could prioritize. And
Exactly.
then price tag makes it, for some people, and for lots of folks actually, prohibitive.
Absolutely.
To even figure out that it's for me, you know. So.
And I mean, when, you know, if we're talking about like price tag, then I lived in Harlem for, I guess, a good, let's see, I came here in 1999, so a good 10 years or so. And I can't tell you that there was one gym there when I was there. Now, eventually, they added like a Planet Fitness, and then later on, there was like a New York Sports Club, because at that point, that's when things became gentrified. It wasn't because they felt that we needed it. It was because they knew that the people that were coming in needed it. And that's where privilege comes into play. It wasn't about the right that it wasn't about our right to be able to exercise and to have a gym and to have a place to go to. It had nothing to do with us. It had to do with the fact that white people were moving from their respective place, which is typically downtown, and they decided that they wanted to come uptown because, yes, and we have food deserts, and all of that comes into play. That's why we have a Whole Foods now. That's why we have all these yoga studios. We weren't, you know, we didn't give a damn at that point. Not that we didn't give a damn, but they felt like we didn't. You know, if someone would have, you know, if we would have, they also didn't give us the opportunity, or even the capital or the money to be able to open those types of businesses, you know. So all of a sudden, all of these healthy things, you know, including ways to exercise, are uptown, but it's not really for us. It's only because it's your privileged white people who are coming into that community, and they wanted to make sure that they had what they needed, right? It wasn't about, and that's privilege. But they didn't feel like and they would never say this, but they didn't feel like we had the right to fresh vegetables, fresh food, to a New York sports club that's clean, to, any of the other gyms, to yoga studios with people that look like us, not just white people moving up here and putting stuff in our communities, but people who look like us opening, studios and gyms so that we could also exercise. Because not only is it just like it's not because we're Black that we need to exercise, because we're damn humans. We want to be able to move our body. We're not just performers. We're not just there performing for you and dancing and tap dancing and dunking a ball and throwing a football and catching it and making a touchdown. Those people are elite athletes, and those are the things that they do. But we also have a right to be able to move our bodies, and our exercise, at least when I was younger, I'm 51, our exercise is going outside in the backyard and running around and climbing trees and jumping off of this and jumping off of that. That was our exercise. And, as I was bringing my own kids up, I still took my kids out. I didn't let them, phones were just coming into play at that point, but I wanted my kids to be able to move. So I still took them out to the park, and I still made them like jump around and do sports. And, my daughter was a dancer. My son's a track star now, and all that kind of stuff like that. So I wanted them to know, as their mom, that they have a right to be able to move, whether it's their sport or whether it's, or just keeping themselves in shape and exercise. And I had to also be that example for them so that they could know, well, look at my mom, wow, my mom's doing all this cool stuff. And even now, like, I'm also a power lifter and I compete from time to time. And, I also teach Pilates, and I've done some bodybuilding and all kinds of stuff. And so I've been that example for my kids, because if anybody's going to be the example of what they have a right to, it's going to be me, because I'm their parent. And, even though I'm not married to their dad anymore, he did do a great job with that as well, by being that. Oh, that was a little shade. But he is a good dad in that regard. And he was also an exerciser as well. And yes, and modeling is important, because I think us modeling to our children and to, friends or relatives and stuff like that, that's also an example of what we have a right to. Because I have just as much a right to teach Pilates and do Pilates as Karen and Brad and Becky and all those other people do. Just because it was started by a white man, it doesn't mean that I don't have a right to do it. And all these centuries, I guess you could say, our communities have always been the last to get everything. And when we did get something, it was only because they were getting ready to move into our communities. So then, oh, now you can have the right to do that. No, I deserved the right before you guys came. So I also feel like that we didn't have the access to capital and, and the money to be able to open, such things.
Right. That the capital part is a huge thing. And I think that there are two things that I'm sitting with that you are mentioning. One is time as privilege. So the thing that we talk about a lot, particularly as women of color and particularly as Black women, is not having the time to exercise. And that time is a commodity we don't get back. And so that in the time that we have, you talked about that order of priority, the things that we need to take care of, that exercise doesn't seem to make the time schedule.
Yeah.
And think about it as a right versus a privilege, and right to put it in the time. And so therefore you got to prioritize it. So it just like flips it completely. I'm still on feeling this in my spirit from when my ancestors were in, like, I'm still on that. So
Yeah.
you're just saying is a word. And we have a bunch of folks saying stuff here for our friends on Facebook. We have Jacqueline saying exercise is political. Explain
Yeah.
that. Oh, explain that, Michaela. And then we have Nika saying caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And that's from Audre Lorde.
Yes, I would say that. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I also feel like, as she brought that up, that, and as I'm thinking about it, that's the one thing they don't want us to do. They don't want us to be able to take care of ourselves, because that's why we have food deserts. That's why we have physical activity deserts, all of those kinds of things, because if they give us the power to take care of ourselves, then that means that they're going to lose, or they feel like they will lose their privilege and their rights, when that's not the case. So it goes back to them. They're still trying to keep us at the level of animals, or rather below animals. And that's pretty deep. Here we are in 2020, and even though, like, you've seen us, we're doing all these great things. We got your Beyoncés and your Jay-Z's and your what else, P. Diddy's, and where are they, by the way? That's a whole other podcast right now. Okay, I ain't seen no money yet. But anyway, we've got all these people doing all these great things and stuff like that, but still yet they will still keep the resources from our community. They'll still keep them out of our communities. And they'll be like, well, I don't understand why you guys are not exercising. Well, first of all, because I don't really see anybody who looks like me doing it. And then right now, like, I'm not trying to worry about exercising, child. I'm trying to pay my light bill and make sure my kids get a good education. And, our priorities are different. And I think that that's a major plus for us, because our families are important. And if that means that your health may suffer, then that's what will happen. And if you think back, my mom was a nurse's assistant at her hospital, and she had 3 kids. I'm the middle kid, my older brother Juan, my younger brother Trent, in Texas, a small town, and she's working by herself. My dad's doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. But my mom is taking care of 3 kids. And, I remember, when I think back to it, I remember my mom wearing shoes that she literally was like taking like the shoe polish and like making it, repairing her shoes so that we could have something to wear. And so that shows where our priorities are as Black people. Our families mean a lot to us. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. But if we have to risk our health to make sure that our families are good, then that's what's going to happen. Well, forget about an equinox or whatever. I could care less, But, we're also in times where we have a few more rights than we did, centuries, or not centuries ago, decades ago, right? So we've got our younger generation who, are not making a hell of a lot of money, but they're making money, and, they're wanting to do, they're doing, those things that a lot of us didn't do when we were younger. And so they're afforded some things that we probably couldn't afford at their age and stuff like that, because we were married or had families or whatever it was we were doing, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little, so it is a little different, but, we're only given so much right, and, it's kind of like they just give us a few rights and that's about it. Like, we just want to give you enough so you feel like you've actually done something. Like, okay, cool. That's good. That's good. And so when it comes to exercise, and it being our right to be able to exercise, is it? Yes, the hell it is. It sure is. And we deserve to be healthy, And it's not necessarily about exercise. We deserve to have healthy foods. We deserve to be able to move, whatever that looks like. And then also, girl, I got a whole ass TED Talk. If you know anybody from TED Talk, I would love to, because I got a lot of shit to say. But listen.
You're like, this is so good.
Yeah, but listen, here's the other thing too. Think about this. So our own people from Africa, what is one of the things that they do all the time as like celebration or whatever, for weddings, or, well, I guess it's not weddings, but whatever, however they dance. They dance. That's what they do. They dance. They dance all the time for just whatever reason. And I mean, I'm not going to say that I know everything about African tribes or whatever, but I know, but I know enough, and they dance. Is that not, I mean, maybe it's not technically formal exercise, but it's movement. And think about it. How many, yes, there are some larger African women and stuff like that. But I mean, how many do you see that are dangerously obese in Africa? When you think about it, how many do you see? Not many at all. The things that are killing our African brothers and sisters over there is the same thing that they're trying to kill us with over here, is taking their resources from them.
And I would also say, like, even to my mom's generation, so you're 51, my mom is 68, so you're probably the top end of my generation. I'm at 40. Even my mom's generation, if I think about Caribbean women in her who before they came here, who were working in with their respective countries, there might have been some larger women, but I very rarely remember people who were like obese. That morbidly obese. And so I think that's really fascinating, making that correlation. And dance is a huge, huge part of Caribbean culture as well. And movement. I love that you said not just dance, but movement. But this is deep. There's definitely something, there.
Yeah, there's so much more to it. And as I've started to think about it, just reading books and stuff like that. And I'm a huge Angela Davis fan, like huge. And I'm also starting to study a lot of the women who were the main movers and shakers within the Black Panther Party. And I've learned so much from them. I mean, just stuff that I was just like, I did not know that, that things that have affected the Black community that I just didn't really think about. So, going back to our, what we were talking about, when I have a group called, I have an instructor group for Black Girl Pilates, but I also have a group for Black women who are interested in Pilates, and some of them are interested in teaching, and a lot of them are just amazed that, and we can definitely talk about it. A lot of them are amazed. They're like, I didn't know that there was any Black women that taught it, and sure as hell didn't know. I do not certify teachers, but I can certainly, there's a lot of women in my group who do. And one of my friends actually is working on her own certification, which I will be a part of sometime soon. But of course, right now, thank you, Corona, that's just probably going to be a hole for the moment. So, but even with these women who, some of them have never taken Pilates before at all, they're just like, oh my God, I didn't even know that I could, because all I see is white women. And then when you look up Pilates, the first thing that pops up is white women. But I did find out recently, either an instructor within my group or one of the women in the tribe group looked up Pilates, and guess whose picture showed up? Me, along with many other white women. Yes, my picture, and then 1,000 other white women, which was amazing, because I was like, well, look at God, but even those women within that tribe group, they're just like, I didn't even know that was something that we could do. And and seeing yourself is so important. That tells you that you have the right to do it. because you see yourself doing it. It's just like we never thought that we could play tennis, but thank Black Jesus for Serena and Venus, right? I mean, they are literally, and they're not even really playing right now, but they are I mean, you know, thank goodness for them, because then we wouldn't have all the other young girls who are playing tennis now, you know, thank goodness for them. Well, basketball is a whole other thing. I mean, we pretty much rule that, and football is the same thing, you know, or even, God bless his soul, but, our golf legend, what's his name? Tiger Woods. We would have never thought Black people could play, although he says he's Blasian, but whatever. We would have never thought, oh, we don't play golf or whatever. Yeah, we do. We play hockey. We do a lot of things, so if you don't see a person doing it, then you don't feel like you have the right to do it, and so white people have they have their white rights, and they have their white privilege, and all that stuff. And it's in full, it's just full on everything, whereas we only have a certain amount of rights and a certain amount of privilege, regardless of the amount of money that we're making. And although I looked up, the top, I think it was maybe the top 5 Black billionaires. Oprah is one of them. Where is she at? I'm wondering the same thing. And, and I'm like, wow, there's these 5, I think it was 5 top African American or Black American, I'd rather say, billionaires in the US. But even with that, they still, and yeah, are they afforded a certain privilege? Absolutely. And even if they do cape for white people, there's only so much they're going to get. There's only so much they're going to get. Because white people are always going to hold on to the rights to everything as much as possible. And they're going to hold on to the privilege to everything as much as possible. And so it's our job, which is why I started Black Girl Pilates, and I write the articles that I write, to show, no, we have the right to exercise. We have the right to do everything. We have the right to love whoever we want to love. We have the right to have 20 children or no children. We have the right to get married or not. We have the right to tell you you're appropriating our culture or not, which most of the time we will. I mean, so we have just as many rights as a white person. And it's really interesting to sit here and talk about having the right to exercise. When I think about it, it's so I'm basically saying, so am I saying that I'm not human? That I'm not because white people don't really think about what they have the right to do. They just do it, they just do it. And I was just so I have to think about it. I have to discuss it. Do I have the right to actually go in here and pick up this barbell and compete? Do I? Well, they don't ask that question. They just go do it, right? They just go do it. And I think, time is out for us to be do we have the right? The hell, we do have the right. We've been having the right. We can do whatever we want to do. Right now, with what's going on in our political climate, whose vote are they trying to get? This one right here. They're trying to oh, all of a sudden we got some rights now, don't we? Well, we've been having some rights. It's just that you guys have controlled the purse strings. You guys have controlled everything. And to think that, not only is it about having the right to exercise, right? Just to exercise, right? That we're talking about, it's so much, there's so much more to it than just having the right to exercise. And think about it, even dance companies like Dance Theater of Harlem and Alvin Ailey, they had to form their own companies so that they would have the right to dance. That's the only way that they could dance. A lot of them couldn't dance in ballet companies because they don't They don't think that Black people can do that kind of thing. So they created their own space. They solved the problem, you know? And so that's what I did with Black Girl Pilates is I saw that there's something needed to be solved. So I solved it. So I brought us all together. So then people like you could come to my platform and be like, well, damn, I didn't even think I could even do Pilates. I used to go to this Pilates studio all the time and ain't nobody there look like me. And if I do see somebody, it's just like, you know, you do the head nod or whatever it is that we do and stuff like that. But that's about it. You know, you never thought that you could actually work with someone who looked like you. And I put the question on my Facebook page long time ago, where I said that I have started to slowly get myself out of how I was taught to teach bodies, because the only bodies that I've been trained to teach were white bodies, because that's all I saw. And so I said, I'm getting out of that shit. Nope, not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. And so I had this white instructor. She should know better. Well, I think that hopefully she does. I've had to snatch her edges a couple times. But anyway, she came in and she felt like she had something to say because she's worked with Black bodies. I said, but you're white. You don't know what it's like to be Black. You don't have any ass, you know? So you don't know. You don't know. And so I'm talking about me and my other sisters and brothers who are Black people who teach white bodies all day with totally different asses than us. You know, they either, if they got some, it's just, you know, I don't know why, but I mean, but it's a totally different it's a totally different outlook or it's different, you know, it's totally different. And so when I wrote that, I was just like, I have to make a concerted effort to work with more Black bodies, because I don't get that chance to. And B, I know that I have to work with them differently, and I cannot cue them like I do a white body. I can't.
I mean, I'm so fascinated by this because I'm just like, well, I'm gonna just see what could happen, because even in class, sometimes I'm working with instructors, I'm like, I just can't, like, my body doesn't, there's certain things I just can't, like, there's just so many things that you just kind of broke down tonight that just, you know, folks are like, TED Talk. So please organize your thoughts into a TED Talk so we can get you on, because this was so great. Like, I know that we could talk about this all night, like just the political, I'm just recapping some of the stuff you said, just like the political nature of the right to exercise, the historical context that lives throughout our DNA around our aversion or deprioritization of work or prioritization of family as necessity over other things, you know, of understanding how institutional racism sits with gentrification, with food deserts, with exercise deserts, etc., in our ability to be able to even believe that that is possible, and in that visibility of seeing people who look like us, and that lots of us from when we were little, you gotta see it and then you gotta do it.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, and so I just think that you just kind of broke that whole thing down for us. I want to make sure that we have a couple minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions or comments or kudos you want to just drop in the chat now so that Sonja can answer them. I just looked at the room. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, we're coming on our hour. I didn't even realize it, because I was leaning in like, and then what happened? What else should we do? So I love that. But if there are any questions, friends, that y'all have or comments you want to chat, like, oh, if there's something that blew your mind, I just ran down the 4 things. And I was just like, all right, I need a drink or something. Jacqueline wants to know, do you do online classes?
I do. Right now I teach for the Pilates studio that I work for, Uptown Pilates, but the ladies in my group have been saying that they want me to actually teach them a class. So I am going to teach, but it's going to be like donation, because most of us aren't working. So the plan is to teach an online class through Zoom for my teachers, and then I'm going to teach an online class for Black women.
Oh, let us know, because I will totally promote
Yeah.
that. I just saw, so I go to Pilates, Club Pilates, which is what's closest to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And even then it's a 25-minute drive, which is,
Yeah.
that's the privilege inherent in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw an email come out today where they were like, Maria's doing online classes, and it was not free. It's $35 a week
Oh, yeah.
to be on Zoom. And so, but if the option is nothing or something, and you have a quality instructor, which I know you have them 390 in spades, like there's an opportunity to do that. So, please let me know when you're ready to do that. I know that many of us would be super excited to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're gonna do mat classes, right?
Yeah, I'll do mat. Mm-hmm.
And that'll be super exciting. Just a really good way to introduce
Mm-hmm.
that to more of us, particularly many of us who are leading very sedentary lives. We're at our computers all day. We're on Zoom all day. Just things that will allow us to be able to figure out how to move our bodies and stretch and get ourselves opened up. It's a possibility to be amazing. So I look so forward to it. Sonja, thank you so. Oh my gosh, times 1,000 so much. Like, I did not expect to get a whole ass political lesson on exercise, and I'm like, now I gotta go do research, okay? Because I need to know. Thank you so much. You are a gift.
Thank you.
Please let us know when you are ready to do the class. We stand ready to join and support you and learn. We're super excited. Our collaborative exists. And when you were telling your story, for similar reasons, like we want to create a space where we can build community globally, where we can access information and resources, we can be ourselves, and we can learn, we can ask questions, we can be curious, we can push each other.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful to you, because you are already leading the way in your space and in your domain of expertise doing that work. So we see that it's possible. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I hope we can again longer.
Yes, I know. You could have, and I would have had you do it. Woo. All right, friends, it is 7:55 Eastern time. We have our next speaker dropping and saying thank you, Sonja, in the chat. In 5 minutes.